Good morning, everyone. I would like to call the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Executive Committee meeting February 24th, 2023 to order. Thank you for making the time to attend early this morning. I hope everybody's safe with the snow and the heavy rains, the drives or your homes or everything. So, Andrea, can we start with a roll call vote, please?
Yes, I'll start with you, Chair Walia.
Present.
Vice Chair Mekachek.
Present.
Director Rennie.
Here.
Director Martinez-Beltran.
Here.
Thank you. I will note that Director Tyson is absent, but we do have a quorum of the committee.
Thank you, Andrea. Any other announcements since this is our virtual meeting? Do you need to go through that teleconference meeting rules or we're good?
I can just note that this meeting is being conducted in accordance with California, Government Code Section 54953E in consideration of the coronavirus. And any members of the public who would like to speak, please press *9 during the public comment period.
Thank you, Andrea. This is the time I'd like to open the meeting for public comment. And Andrea, do we have any members of the public?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, wonderful. With that, I close the public comment period and we start with the agenda items. The first one is consent calendar. It's an action item. Does anyone have any changes or suggestions? If not, I need to open for public before I ask for a motion. Okay, I open this item for public comment. Andrea? Seeing
No
none?
hands raised.
Okay, wonderful. I close the public comment period. Is there a motion for the consent calendar item to approve minutes of the Jan 27th, 2023 Executive Committee meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have a second?
Second.
Wonderful. Can we have a roll call vote, Andrea?
Yes, Chair Walia.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mekachek.
Aye.
Director Rennie. Director Martinez-Beltran.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries with Director Tyson absent.
Thank you. We move on to the regular calendar. The item number 2 this morning is a CEO update. It's a discussion item. And I believe our CEO is out and Monica, the COO, is the acting CEO. So we'll wait for Monica's report.
So I actually have a fairly short report on behalf of Girish. It's actually going to be given by Director of Decarbonization and Program Policy, Justin Sagunas. So he's going to give an update or a report on our direct install programs. So I'll hand it over to Justin.
Great, thanks, Monica. And good morning, directors. As Monica said, we just wanted to provide kind of a quick snapshot here on residential building electrification programs. Over the past year-ish, the board has approved and some funding and concepts for a variety of program types. And we did get the first of those launched last year. And this next year is going to be very busy because we're going to be launching hopefully quite a few of the others. So I just wanted to give you kind of a check in here and sort of say, this is what the timeline looks like, give you a sense of what's coming. Happy to discuss, but you'll obviously be able to keep an eye out for more details as these get closer to launch. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, are you all able to see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so as I said, this last year, in the fall of this last year, we did launch our whole home incentives, and this is really a kind of typical incentive program in that it's self-serve, allows layering. The really interesting thing about this program is that we took our existing heat pump water heater incentives and we really expanded to all other elements of the home and trying to promote residents to electrify every end use in their home rather than kind of just a single one, or at least plan to think about what it will take to electrify all the end uses. So we have pre-wiring incentives, we have panel upgrade incentives, we incentivize pausers and splitters to try to help people avoid panel upgrades. So really interesting sort of suite of incentives that is now live. We did a soft launch and we're now more aggressively promoting it. we're in development right now of these next two features, which kind of tie into the whole home incentive. So the first is this concierge service. And the idea here is we want to make it easier for people who maybe don't know that much about electrification or have a very specific question about their project to be able to call in and just talk to someone, or email and talk to someone who can walk them through it, spend the time kind of learning about their project and help them. This is really critical to reaching people who maybe aren't super savvy on electrification. And I think something we view as really important to broadening our reach to kind of the more typical homeowners in this territory. Water heater loaner program is also something we're considering and working on, because it's really for these emergency replacements. So when your water heater goes out, you don't want to wait a long time for new wiring to come in, be without hot water for a long time. And so if we can give them a temporary fix and then work with them over the next couple of weeks or so to actually install a heat pump technology, we think we can, again, make it easier for people to take this action. In the planning phase right now is the multifamily direct install, which you may recall the board added a significant amount of funding to this last winter. And so this will be offered at no cost to multifamily properties. We're going to be targeting lower income, affordable housing type properties. Although we may include some sort of naturally occurring or moderate income as well. We're including baseboard electric heating replacement. And this is something that we will sort of manage. So we'll have a contractor who goes out and does this work. And we're going to learn a lot about what it takes to electrify these properties and sort of help achieve some of our equity goals in terms of reaching a slightly different population here. Finally, the tariff on-bill financing program is something that the board kind of approved conceptually at some point in terms of allowing us to move forward with applying to the CPUC for this pilot, but this will come back to the board before we sign any contract or make any commitments for a full kind of formal approval and discussion. But this is a really cool program that is going to be testing out leveraging outside capital sources. So it's really a scalability program and a program that has the potential for scalability. We are currently waiting for the CPUC to make a determination on whether they'll co-fund it and approve it, because it requires a lot on the billing system and has some sort of utility obligation requirements. But this will be applicable for single family and small multifamily renters and owners, which is really key. It's really hard to reach renters, and this is a program that will be able to reach renters. And again, this would be SVCE managed, and so we would have a contractor who would kind of go in and do this work. So you'll definitely be seeing more about this if and when we get approval from the CPUC to proceed. But these are the kind of the big programs over this next year. One of the things that we're currently thinking about that's not reflected here is if we want to sort of offer a single family direct install as well. So that would be on top of this multifamily direct install. It would kind of sit somewhere between the water heater loaner and the multifamily direct install. But really the goal with all of these different pieces is how do we reach a large variety of market segments in our territory? And how do we help all these people start to electrify, whether they're renters, whether they're in multifamily, whether they're in single family. And so these are all just different approaches at it. And we're going to learn a lot about which one which one is more effective for reaching different market segments. Okay, with that, Monica, I will
Hey, Justin,
turn
you
it
may
back
want
to
to
you.
turn off your camera. Yeah. Justin, can you hear me?
Ann.
Oh, you may want to turn off your camera, or maybe it's my connection, but you're coming in and out.
Okay, I will turn off my camera.
Monica, I didn't see any issues with Justin, but I am seeing Brian has some technical issue and he's taken his video feed off. Brian, do you want to say something before we proceed?
Yes, I would. Could you put that last slide up again? I have just a couple comments.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So Monica, are you done with your full presentation? And Justin, before I take it to the committee? Are we good, Monica?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Justin, are you done?
Yes, all good.
Okay, wonderful. And thank you for putting that slide up. So we'll start with questions, starting with Brian.
So I don't really have a question, but I have a couple of comments that I'd like to put forth. What I see on here is multifamily, but I don't see, excuse me, HOAs, homeowner associations. And let me describe my interest in those. I've got one unit in a townhouse in Los Gatos, and there's only 8 units in there. And what I did was my hot water heater was failing, and my tenant was getting a little more than upset with me. So I said, okay, we'll get a heat pump water heater in here, because I've got one in my house and they are unbelievable in terms of performance, I think. And so I had to get the permits, etc., from the town of Los Gatos. And then I had an approved a contractor that I got off the website, the SVCE's website. And I called a couple of them. I got a gentleman to come in, and one of his employees installed it. And then I had the inspection, and I failed they failed the inspection. So they had to come out, and just yesterday they addressed the deficiency, which had to do with an overflow valve, and then it's all set to go. So it's going to be inspected on Monday and go final, hopefully, and then it'll be done. My point in this is that now that I've got a heat pump water heater in place, the other 7 units can take a look at mine and see exactly what's required, what the timing is, etc. So I'm going to reach out to them. We all know each other. Obviously, it's just 8 units. So that's kind of a little comment. And then the next point is, it would be good for you to consider HOAs, because you can scale in an HOA reasonably easily versus individual homes that are all different. Because a lot of HOAs, they kind of have a standard template and they cookie cutter the units. So I just wanted to put that out for you to consider. And then my final comment is, it would be good if there was a way to track leads and referrals. So for example, not from a monetary perspective, but just how are you getting the word out? What works? Because it would be good if I'm showing other people, just say, here's a tracking code. And I'm pretty sure that Sonoma Clean Power does that. They have a code so that they can track referrals. And then I may have said that's my last point, but my final point is what we intend on doing in the next year with Monte Sereno is actually having a demonstration heat pump water heater in our community center. So when people from other jurisdictions want to know about them, they can come over and see that particular heat pump water heater. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Brian, thank you so much. All very good points, food for thought as well. And before I go further, I'm going to say, Brian, can you please keep us all posted when you have that demo in your community center, so we can also reach out and inform people on our councils.
Absolutely. We can't get that completed fast enough.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great. So other questions from the committee, or I can open public comment, then bring it back for continuing the discussion. Any other questions at this point? Seeing none, I will open for public comment on this item. Andrea.
I'm seeing no hands raised, Chair.
Wonderful. I close the public comment period, bring it back to committee. So other thoughts? Brian has shared some of his opinions. Yvonne, Rob? No other comments? Okay. Justin or Monica, would you like to share something based on what Brian said? Or should we just move on to the next item?
I'll just say I appreciate the comments. We'll capture those and incorporate them into our thinking. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Justin. Okay, with that, we move on to item number 3, which is the resource adequacy and reliability presentation, which is an information only item. Monica.
So I'm going to ask Andrea to share her screen. But this is kind of an extension of some of the discussion that we had at the board meeting last week. And in Girish's CEO report to the board, not last week, sorry, at the beginning of the month in February, he indicated that SVCE is like for their resource adequacy in 2023. So the intent of this presentation is just to kind of give you a little bit more background about how we believe we got here and what we believe the situation is in terms of resource adequacy and supply availability in California. And then some of the efforts that we're working on either independently or with California Community Choice Alliance or Association, CalCCA, on the advocacy front. I have several from my team here today who have contributed to not just this presentation, but just our overall efforts to meet resource adequacy and reliability. So I intend to call on them if you guys ask me a very technical question. So yeah, this will be somewhat of a tag team approach. And so with that, Andrea, if you go to the next slide. So just again, I know this is something that maybe we'll have to repeat over and over because it is somewhat of a complicated framework that the state has put forward. But again, resource adequacy is just making sure that there's sufficient capacity to meet demand under strained conditions. And so in California, the California Public Utility Commission, or the CPUC, oversees the resource adequacy program. And any load serving entity, including SVCE, which is jurisdiction under the California Public Utility Commission, so all the IOUs and all the CCAs are essentially have to adhere to these program requirements. And so the CPUC determines what each LSC's obligation is, and that's based on a peak monthly demand, with a buffer that they call a planning reserve margin. And so currently that's 16%. So whatever our peak is going to be for all of our load, and each month we take that and then we add 16%, and that's determined on an annual basis. And then the CPUC also has the responsibility of determining what each resource can contribute based on its technology to meeting resource adequacy requirements. And so again, we shared this with you at the board meeting, but they come up with these effectiveness factors, and each type of technology gets a different one. You can see here natural gas is highly effective, whereas solar and wind type resources are less effective. Next slide. So along with this RA program is a compliance or a filing requirement, and we essentially have two main filing requirements. One is called the year ahead resource adequacy filing. We call it the YARA. And in that filing, we have to demonstrate that at least 90% of our obligations for the summer months, which they define as May through October, have been met. That is, that we've lined up sufficient capacity to meet our obligation at least at a 90% level. And traditionally, we submit that filing by the end of October, but this last year, they allowed us an extension through the end of December to make that filing. Through that filing, we identified that we will be deficient in the year ahead filing. And then they also have us do a monthly filing for every month of the year. Those are called the MARAs. And in those filings, we have to demonstrate that we've met 100% of our requirement. Again, that's our peak obligation plus that planning reserve margin or the buffer. And those are due 45 days before the month starts. We have the ability to cure any deficiencies that we identified, or we must try to cure any deficiencies that we identified in the YARA filing. But more importantly, it's that we have to get to 100% of our obligation every month. Given where we see things going right now, our projection is that we may be deficient in some summer months in the MARA filing as well. Next slide. So what has SVCE done kind of in general, but more specific to 2023 to line up supply to meet resource adequacy? Well, it starts with, we have a whole bunch of things always kind of in the works, but you know, in general, we implement what's called a laddered procurement strategy, where we try to fill little bits and pieces on a forward basis, so that we're making sure that we're trying to layer in some capacity at all time. And for the 2023 year, you know, we probably started to purchase for 2023 as early as maybe 2020. So bringing in small amounts. But until we actually know what our real obligation is going to be, and that's what our load requirement is, minus whatever we think we're going to get for our resources, it's really hard for us to fine tune what we're actually going to get. So we tend to buy most of our needs as we get closer to the year. Our power purchase agreements are another big source of resource adequacy capacity for us. And, you know, we started to enter into long-term PPAs as early as 2018. And when we were entering into these power purchase agreements for SVCE, it was very important that whatever resource we took on, that we could count it for resource adequacy in the future. So we made sure that system operators market where they could count their resource to what they call deliverability. And so that's really important for us as well. I'm going to go off camera because my internet is unstable.
Yes,
I am
thank
on
you,
camera.
Monica. We have also lost a few words coming from you in the middle of sentences. Not too
Okay.
bad so far, so just so that you are aware of that. Thank you.
Okay, if it gets too bad, Charles, if you can just take over. I'll try to get on my MiFi in a little bit as well when I find a pause, if that
Sounds
works.
good.
Okay. We've also lined up a significant amount of storage capacity, both paired with solar and standalone storage as well, because we believe storage has the benefit of adding value to our existing resources and portfolio, but also is a good hedge for resource adequacy in the future. We've also contracted for a significant amount of baseload resources through either natural gas or geothermal, which is a clean source of baseload capacity. We constantly issue solicitations in the market to try to find these resources. Director Beltran, you have your hand up.
I'm just, yeah, I'd like to understand a little bit more where you say CPUC determines how much each technology counts. What is it? And I see the 30% of solar is being counted. What determines how that shifts?
So I'll let Charles answer that question while I hop over to MiFi anyway.
Sure. Yeah, so the CPUC will do a study. They look at the entire grid and say, you know, how are these resources effective at meeting these reliability needs? Like typically that's going to be in your evening peak when load is highest. And so a solar resource can only contribute to so many of those hours before obviously the sun goes down. And then batteries have a limited duration, so only 4 hours. And so their effectiveness factor towards meeting reliability diminishes when you look at those specific constrained periods. So solar in this example, or solar plus storage, really gets the biggest haircut. It counts for very little. In the previous slide, in certain months, solar doesn't contribute to reliability at all. It's actually getting like a 2 or 0% effectiveness factor. And so that's kind of what we're trying to show here. But the CPUC, they do that study. They look at every single month in the next calendar year and even several years after, but they determine these factors for the different technology. And that kind of gives us a signal on what technologies we should pursue in terms of reliability and how they count.
Okay, and what about wind? So you're saying 2% for solar. What about wind?
So wind, yeah, it's the little blue stack. Typically, wind nameplate is, depending on the month, anywhere from 10 to 30%. So you know, a lot of wind counts for almost not a lot of RA. And that's they look at this regionally as well. So like certain areas of the country, you know, obviously produce better wind than others. So there's a little bit of a diversification effect with wind, but it does get a pretty significant haircut. If we showed solar alone, you wouldn't even be able to see the sliver really.
Okay, thank you.
So I hope I have a more stable connection, but Charles, just be aware that you might have to jump in. So just to kind of finish up on this slide, as I was mentioning, we do, Charles and his team issues solicitations very, very frequent to try to get the resources that we need, not just for the month ahead, but any future years as well. His team also, or he's active in what we call the bilateral market. So talking directly to owners of some of these resources that have resource adequacy to see if they have capacity that they could sell us either short-term or long-term. And then finally, we're also very active in what's called a broker market, where it's essentially where buyers and sellers come together to see if there's capacity that can be bought or sold. But as Charles mentioned, you know, that a lot of the capacity that we rely on for clean energy doesn't really contribute much to resource adequacy. And so we do heavily rely on natural gas resources in the short-term market to meet a lot of our obligations. Next slide. So, you know, the power purchase agreements, again, we take these because we need them for compliance. They meet our board directives. They're a clean source of electricity. They'll help us meet our renewable, well, they will meet our renewable portfolio standard. And so the projects that we really truly want, and every single project that we've signed, it's been with the intent of bringing it online for the benefit of our customers. But these projects have delays. And so in addition to getting a haircut on how much we can count, the delays, when these projects are delayed, we can't count them towards resource adequacy, because the CPUC is very, very specific about where it has to be in the development phase in order for you to count it towards resource adequacy. And so we've identified that, you know, somewhere in the order of 450 megawatts of solar and over 218 megawatts of storage capacity has been subject to some form of delay since in the year 2023. So a lot of these contracts had online dates that we expected in sometime in 2022, quite frankly, and some even in 2021. And they're either being delayed to later in 2023 or sometime in 2024, and in some cases beyond 2024. So this is capacity that we had counted on for resource adequacy that is no longer available for us to report. And the reason for these delays are reasons that we've talked about, you know, many times with the board. Globally, you know, COVID, supply chain, and labor issues. Nationally, we've got tariff circumvention and forced labor concerns that have kind of delayed the ability to bring PV panels and batteries into the country. Locally, we have interconnection, permitting, and transmission delays. Part of it is, again, due to labor and just the amount of projects that are in the queue to be brought online. And then there's always the project economics and financing, you know, with the interest rates going up and all of the costs going up as well because of all of these issues. Some projects are facing delay just because they need to get financing or they need to figure out how they're going to make the project work. But my point here is that, you know, we had planned for quite some more capacity for resource adequacy. Next slide. So this is SVCE's opinion. And so, you know, it's based on our understanding of what is happening in the RA market and based on what we've seen and what we understand the regulatory impacts are on the market as well. But we think that essentially that there's an insufficient amount of supply in the market right now. And there's essentially two main elements that may be impacting that insufficiency of supply. On the one side, it's really about the RA program itself and the rules and requirements to meet resource adequacy. So, you know, CPUC's counting rules on renewable technologies have eroded value, and they continue to go down since we first signed the contracts. Every year we see less and less value or less and less counting capacity assigned to resources like solar and wind. And the CPUC has undergone several regulatory changes to the RA framework in the last few years and are currently looking at some additional changes. And these changes create a lot of kind of commotion and uncertainty in the market. And that has an impact, not just on price, but sometimes on the availability of these resources, such as in the case of import resource adequacy or capacity that's coming from outside of the CalISO or outside of California. The rules that they've included are somewhat onerous and perhaps are keeping marketers or sellers of those resources from selling to California. And then this last one is kind of a complicated one, but a couple of years ago, the CPUC adopted a decision that transferred the obligation for a certain portion of our resource adequacy, known as local resource adequacy, to a central procurement entity. And so that central procurement entity was supposed to have purchased all of the local resource adequacy attributes for all of the load serving entities within the CPUC's jurisdictional area. For us, PG&E was the CPE. Two things happened. One, they were not able to procure sufficient local RA. And so that obligation came back to us in the form of a system resource adequacy obligation. And second, the timing of it was very disruptive. Like, we didn't learn what the actual results were of their procurement efforts until way late in the year. And at that point, we're scrambling with everybody else to try to make up the deficiency there. And it was just not an effective process. Other kind of things that we believe are affecting the supply in California include out-of-state entities or non-CalISO entities procuring resource adequacy. And so some of the neighboring states and for sure the neighboring balancing authorities outside of CalISO have requirements now for resource adequacy as well. And so capacity that may have been intended or built or believed to be part of the CalISO is leaving the CalISO. So that's supply that we can't buy. The second point is a little bit complicated, but if you recall, we talked about a planning reserve margin or a buffer that an LSC has to buy to. For most of us, or for all of us, it's 16%. But the CPUC allowed or indicated to the IOUs like PG&E and SoCal Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric that for the summer of 2023, that they could procure up to a higher planning reserve margin, and that whatever they procured above the 16% would essentially be, they'll be able to collect those costs through a cost allocation mechanism that distributes the cost onto all load serving entities. But we wouldn't get the benefit of the attributes, we would just get the cost to our ratepayers. And so we believe that PG&E and the other IOUs actually procured to this high PRM, therefore taking supply resources outside of the market that we could have procured. And then this last point is that because of some of the reliability and heat wave issues that we've had, not just this year, but in years before, the state has allowed the Department of Water Resources to retain a certain amount of capacity that they call for kind of more emergency basis, and they're calling that the Strategic Reliability Reserve. And so there's capacity that may have been available to the market in the past is now being put in this reserve for emergency purposes. Next slide. So here are some potential solutions that we've identified either individually or with the support of CalCCA. First of all, the regulators must acknowledge that the market is severely constrained and design policies that are in response to this constrained market. This would include modifying import requirements to be less onerous so that resources actually do come or want to come to California. Modifications to the central procurement entity timeline and the notification process so that we have enough time to procure any deficiencies that the CPE has. And so we have to kind of work together with them now, which is something new to us, and it wasn't part of the design of the CPE program. The IOU's effective planning reserve margin needs to be refined to avoid effectively double penalizing us. And so again, they're allowed to procure resources and take them off the market, charge all of our customers for it, but we don't get the benefit of counting any of that capacity that they buy. The state, as well as all of us, need to be more proactive on working on interconnection and transmission problems that are causing these delays on bringing new resources on. Now, that wouldn't have solved necessarily a lot of the 2023 problem, but if these problems continue to happen, then we're going to continue to see delays in interconnecting new resources. And that'll continue to be a source of friction on being able to bring these resources for reliability. The state or someone needs to create more transparency in the market for buyers and sellers. Right now, it's just basically all done kind of one-on-one. Nobody knows who's buying what, who's selling what. There's no capacity market. So it's just a lot of lack of transparency on what the actual state of the market is. We also need to support sound efforts towards regionalization to help bring, again, a better planning and management of resources across balancing authorities and across the states in the West. And then lastly, we believe that the state needs to develop a kind of sound plan which considers fossil fuel retirements in the future, understanding that they will be retired as we transition to a clean grid. Because once we know what to expect in terms of which fossil fuel resources will be online and not online, then we can also plan accordingly on how much new capacity we need to bring on. Next slide. Charles, I'm happy to hand this over to you, but happy to keep going too.
Sure, yeah, I can take this one.
Okay.
So we just want to take a minute here to describe our situation in 2023 RA. So we submitted our year ahead filing on December 31st. We were given an extension due to the CPE failure to secure enough local resources. So when we submitted that year ahead filing, we were showing as deficient for the summer months of June through September. And so we expect to continue to be deficient into the month ahead. We're not seeing supply show up. We have been able to make several purchases, but still the position is still short. And so, you know, despite a numerous issues in the marketplace that we're seeing, we're most likely going to be assessed those penalties for year ahead and month ahead. But we just want to make note that we're not alone in this deficiency. Several others have come forward and said that they're, you know, continue to be short. They're not finding supply in the market as well. And so I think the disruption that was perhaps caused by the central procurement entity in clogging up volume and several other factors could contribute to the disruption in the market that we're sort of seeing. And so, you know, there's a variety of factors that we also want to highlight that contributed to the problem. It's the increased obligation due to changes in load. So our peaks have increased relative to other years. Also, we've just experienced delays in bringing PPAs online. So many of our contracts are in renegotiation. We've had to declare new commercial operation dates for those resources, and a lot of them were scheduled to come online in 2023, and they've been sort of rescheduled. We also had Big Bow leave our portfolio, and so that's another resource that contributed to the RA position. They have a storage component to that resource, which contributed to the summer reliability that we need to focus on. Also, for 2023, there was a big haircut on wind, solar, and storage resources. So when the CPUC did their study, they determined that these technology factors were less reliable for this planning year. And so that really took a hit to SVC's portfolio, since we are a clean portfolio with many of these types of resources. And then highlighting again the CPE's failure to procure sufficient local RA and the timing. So, you know, they launched 2 solicitations. Both of them were not successful by large amounts of volume. SVC was expecting to receive an allocation of some of this procurement, but because they failed, we didn't receive that. We were only given 2 months of additional time to procure, and you know, these 2 months were not particularly seen as valuable to us. You know, this is not typically time that you would go out and try to find capacity, so it wasn't a great showing of the market to us. And so, you know, we've launched many different RFOs. We've consistently launched them. We have received some offers, but not enough to meet our requirements in 2023. And so this just kind of is coupled with the disruptions in the market that we've seen with the CPE and just lack of ways for us to see what is available in the market. There's not a whole lot of transparency here. But we are continuing to try to fill our monthly obligations. Our team works very hard at trying to find volume. We knock on all the doors and look under all the couch cushions trying to find the stuff. So know that your team is working hard to try to find it. Okay, any questions on the slide?
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Monica. Committee members, Yvonne.
Who is the lack of transparency in this particular case benefiting?
It's hard to say with
In our opinion.
Yeah, in our opinion, I think it definitely benefits the marketers, the people who are selling. Lack of transparency sometimes translates into much higher prices. So, market competitiveness and people getting their positions aligned. Maybe you see a small trickle of RA being sold and prices continue to run up. There's a lot of people trying to buy this stuff. And so you don't really know how much is in the tank at any given time. So definitely, to answer your question, it's really the people who are selling the RA.
Okay.
And who are aware of these market conditions. They know that there's disruption in the market and shortages and haircuts to clean resources.
Right. Now, they have to report, I'm sure, to the CPUC. So the CPUC is able to see both sides transparently. Is that a correct assumption?
They do see the volumes that are traded. They will also receive eventually our confirms. So they do a price report to determine for PCIA. And so they have transparency into what gets traded. What doesn't get traded is a little bit trickier. That takes a little more time to uncover. So they don't typically know the answer to that until each month ahead filing. They see, okay, what's the available supply in the market? What actually showed up in plans? What wasn't there? So we won't really know the answer to these questions until maybe the end of the summer. And if they want to divulge that information, that's up to them, I suppose. But that would be interesting to see, what resources were not shown to the market for whatever reason, what didn't participate in the RA market.
Okay, so then the policy question from the experts, what policy change would be, on your wish list?
Yeah, I think we're going to get to some of those slides too,
Okay.
Director. We have a couple more slides, including some of the advocacy efforts that we're working on individually and through CalCCA.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe the next slide, and I think this is probably your slide too, Charles, the next two one.
Sure. Yep, so just want to take a minute to talk about the RA penalty structure. So we pay penalties, dollars per KW month on all the volume that we are deficient on. We don't have a way of waiving the system penalty of RA. There is one for local because local areas are constrained, they're difficult to transact on, but system doesn't have anything like that. They don't take excuses for why we were deficient. They just want us to go out and buy it. So the penalty rate, it's broken out into two different seasons. So you have a summer rate of $888 a kW month or $8,880 a megawatt month, and then the winter deficiency, which is half that of the summer at $444 a kW month. And so for every month that we're deficient more than a megawatt, we incur a point. And so in the summer, we actually incur 2 points. If you reach these thresholds that I'm showing here in the middle box of 6 points, your deficiency rate is increased by 2. Once you hit 11 points, then it goes to 3. And so you take, if you restore it in the summer and you've accumulated 6 points, then you would take your volume, multiply that by 888, and that would be your penalty assessment. The penalties do accumulate, but they do fall off after, I think, a year or so. And so you do have the opportunity to kind of wipe the slate clean on that. And then the example over here to the right is just showing you how the penalty structure works. So a 10 megawatt deficiency, if you had 2 points, or you're in the second tier of penalty points, you multiply your penalty rate times 2. So that'd be about $177,000 worth of a penalty. The penalty system, there's a lot of criticism of it. Does it set a floor for the market price essentially, because people who are marketing know that you'd have to pay this penalty otherwise? But so the CPUC has sort of indiscriminately enforced this penalty structure per system. And they really haven't taken into consideration like market conditions, individual LC effort by demonstrating how many RFOs we've done. This will be an interesting year to see how they incorporate or take into account the CVE failure. That's one that we definitely want to highlight to them. It caused a major disruption to how we plan and buy resources. And so that's just something that we're going to be discussing with them and advocating against in terms of receiving penalties like this. Any questions on the penalty slide?
Looks like we are all good. Please, Charles. Oh, Brian has a question.
I'm sorry, when will we know this again? I think you said it.
Yeah, so as SVCE, we're going to find out what our year ahead assessment is, probably within the next month or so. And then for every month ahead filing, we'll know probably 1 to 2 months after that month transpires. So, you know, if it's October, we'll probably find out by December, or maybe a little bit later, but maybe like 1 or 2 months. But
Yeah.
the actual system and how that was shown to the market, like the actual, all the RA and how it was shown to LSEs, we'll probably find that information out at the end of the year. We'd have to maybe do some requests. Like, this is an interesting year to try to understand, and so many people are short. And so we'll definitely be requesting information around that.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've asked for, and we'll talk a little bit about advocacy later, is because so many of us are still trying to fill monthly deficiencies, we're trying to make sure that the CPUC doesn't make this information public. Because as soon as you post who's deficient in which months, it puts us at a very disadvantage in the market. And so we don't know the numbers now, and so that's why we're not disclosing to the executive committee what we think our penalty is. You know, partly because we just don't know what it is, and second, because we're still actively trying to cure our deficiencies.
Got it. I understand.
Thank you for your question, Brian, and appreciate the response from both Charles and Monica. It's a complex situation, Monica, as every time we talk about this, you bring it to our attention. Too many pieces, especially the one that hits home the hardest is we're trying to get clean sources of energy, but the way it's counted is 30%. I mean, that's rough. So I think Charles still has a couple of slides.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
you
it's
want me to take this one?
Yeah, you can take this one.
Okay. Yep. So just wanted to talk about our procurement efforts. I think most of you know we're trying to buy these positions and fill the deficiencies for 2023. We are trying to take steps to mitigate even next year and beyond. And so trying to get ahead of this problem, taking into consideration that the CPE has the ability to fail and will not provide us allocations. So we're trying to balance what that looks like. A lot of uncertainty there. And so, you know, we also are launching clean RFOs for bundled energy and capacity. So solar plus storage projects, wind and geothermal, those are all resources that help contribute to reliability, and we need to build out our portfolio. And so that's a very strong effort that we continue to maintain. We also are working with the governor's office. So they have a business development group that helps bring new projects online. They sort of can make the right phone calls, get the right people on the line, and get projects moving quicker than usual. And so we've seen this be very helpful in certain months. Obviously, for the summer, we want to get our projects online as quickly as possible. So we've been working with the governor's office in this regard. And then also the last point here is we are considering natural gas peaker plants with hybridized battery energy storage systems to meet longer term RA needs. And so we've seen a couple other LSEs take this approach where, you know, a gas peaker plant is something that only turns on for reliability purposes. It also has an energy storage system component, which will compete with those peakers. And so it should end up reducing emissions at those project sites. And so, you know, taking account of what we currently buy for our only, which is, you know, almost 80% natural gas, how do you make that better? And we think that adding an energy storage system battery helps contribute to cleaning those resources up. And so these are all efforts that we're undertaking. Each one of them is equally important. Trying to fill 2023 obviously is a major thing that we're taking on, and takes up a lot of staff time as well.
All right, I think we just have one or two more slides. So I'm going to hand it over to Sitlali Sandoval. She's our senior regulatory analyst, and she's going to talk about some of the current regulatory advocacy that we're involved with, either again on our own or with CalCCA. And because Benna is not here today, she's out this week, she's also going to touch on some legislative opportunities or proposals that are in the work as well that we're considering supporting. And I'll just say that this is only going forward. We have participated in many resource adequacy regulatory proceedings in the past, trying to work for fair rules and counting of resources. And so this is a continuing effort from SVCE staff and CalCCA staff. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Sitlali. I'm assuming she's still on.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Monica. So yes, I will be going over the current advocacy efforts. So the CPUC's RA proceeding is currently in the middle of considering various reforms and refinements to the RA program. And we are very engaged in the proceeding. We have been in the past, as Monica said, and we continue to be both individually as SVCE and through our trade association, CalCCA. And actually today, comments are due on various proposals currently under consideration. So I'm just going to go through what's currently being considered. The first thing is the setting of the planning reserve margin, the PRM. So Monica explained earlier that it's 16%. They're considering increasing it to 17% as the base PRM and continuing the effective PRM, which is 20 to 22.5%. They're also evaluating resource eligibility for the effective PRM, and we are trying to ensure that there's no cannibalization of the resources that count for the base PRM actually being used for the effective PRM. The third thing is the CPE showing timelines. Charles kind of explained how the process works with the CPE buying local and the timeline of when we find out what our allocation is and how it's been problematic this past year. So the CPUC is hopefully going to reform the showing timeline for the CPE, which will hopefully improve our own procurement efforts for system. Another proposal that's being considered is the effects of non-compliance for CCAs and ESPs and whether that should prohibit their ability to serve new load. And then lastly, there's an explanation of penalty structure and possible reform for how points are accumulated and whether there should be a waiver for the system product implemented. So we will continue to cover the proceeding, and like I said, we're filing comments today, and by the end of the spring we should have a final decision on these issues. So we will keep you posted on where the commission lands. Secondly, we are always very engaged with our trade association, CalCCA, with their advocacy efforts and the discussions that they regularly have with CPUC staff. And then on the legislative front, the legislative session is in full swing now. So we are currently in the middle of assessing the many bills that are in play this session and potentially supporting the bills that are hopefully going to improve interconnection and the transmission enhancement process. We've seen a lot of bills on this, and one on regionalization efforts this session. So we will continue to analyze them and track them as they proceed through the legislative process. And then finally, there's also the California budget bill. And we are tracking that, of course, because it has several portions that would affect the penalties that we would have to pay, as well as reliability in California. So we're keeping a close eye on the budget bill implementation language, and we'll also be doing some education because the RA market is very complex. And we want to make sure that the legislators are understanding what the full ramifications would be of expanding penalties. So that's the current status of our advocacy efforts, and I will pass it back to Monica.
All right, just a summary slide here, just to kind of close out our thoughts. You know, the CPUC has this resource adequacy framework, but they also have this integrated resource plan process. And together, those two efforts are supposed to be the efforts that help plan and meet reliability in the future. We believe that that system is somewhat broken, and it's broken because, you know, there's so many of us deficient in resource adequacy, and because the integrated resource plan process has essentially not done what it's done, and therefore the CPUC continues to order just procurement orders for new capacity. And these are with very short timelines. So they're not taking the essence of what the IRP planning process was supposed to be. That is that we all kind of plan together for a future and making sure that we meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets while also being reliable and affordable. You know, we believe that the IOU bundled customer and unbundled customers, such as CCA customers, should be treated fairly in the RA framework. And so, you know, because the IOUs have a lot of the capacity, essentially the bundled customers are at an advantage to our customers right now. And the PCIA, or the power cost and difference adjuster, was supposed to be the equalizer, but we don't believe that that's necessarily the case. We believe that increasing or augmenting penalties in the penalty structure will not get more resources built. We've seen this time and time that simply penalizing us cannot accelerate the development of these projects. The development of these projects is a very complex kind of structure that requires a whole lot of things that are outside of our control, the buyer's control. And so penalizing the buyer is not getting these resources built. I think that's just very, very basic. And we also believe that all of this kind of uncertainty and churn and complexity is creating a market dynamic where the CPUC really needs to take that all into consideration, and the consideration of our procurement efforts before penalizing us. You know, the CPUC, I think, believes that there is sufficient supply available in the market for all of us to meet our resource adequacy needs. But we have no reason to believe otherwise, because we issue solicitation after solicitation and we don't see the offers. And so we are in the market, unlike the CPUC. We are actually transacting. We're there. We understand what's being offered and not offered. And all of these penalties and changes and run up on the market price for the resource adequacy, all of this will eventually fall on our customer shoulders, because it has to be recovered one way or another. So this gets to the whole affordability question. You know, are we creating a market structure that is sustainable and affordable long term? So these are just kind of our opinion as staff based on what we see. And I'm sure there'll be different opinions from other stakeholders in this process. So with that, we had nothing else unless you guys have questions. I'll hand it back over to.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you for a detailed walkthrough. This is a big subject, and we will start with Brian's questions.
Thank you. Obviously, very complex with a lot of uncertainty going forward. We created a legislative ad hoc committee, and I'm not sure if this is a question for you, Monica, or Girish, but when is that committee going to have its first meeting?
Andrea.
Yeah, we're looking at getting that scheduled in March.
Okay. I was just wondering how that's gonna, the timing for that. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Yvonne?
Thank you, Chair. Monica, I know we will talk about this in lunch committee, but for purposes of having, my colleagues here, and just kind of going back to my question, this is a lot, and you guys have definitely covered the gamut. We have to start somewhere. We can't do everything. Of this, I'm trying to understand for the most immediate future, what is the most helpful move?
Sure, I think, and again, I'm not the legislative expert here, so I'll rely a bit on Sitlali. The budget bill tracker, the budget tracker bill, whatever that thing is called, as Sitlali mentioned, has a lot of language in it that would make the penalty structure worse for load serving entities like us. And so we're following that very closely to see how, what ends up in the actual, I guess, whatever they call that, Sitlali, the actual bill. So penalty structure and having some influence on what ultimately happens, whether it's through that legislative effort or through some other legislative effort, is something that we really care about. The second one is the interconnection process. And there are several CCAs that are very much following these bills that are being introduced for interconnection, not just for the purpose of resource adequacy, but also we have these midterm reliability procurement orders, and we have these renewable portfolio standards that we have to meet for different legislative mandates that rely heavily on new clean resources being brought on a timely fashion. And so again, these are things that are outside of our control. We can't force these resources to come on if there's not sufficient equipment or labor at the IOUs or whatever it takes to bring these on. So we're very much looking at all of these interconnection bills as well. And so if I, without, I don't want to overstep my position here, because this is really something that Benna and Garish are working on, but I think those are the two. And I don't know, Sitlali, if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, so I'd say that in addition to reforming the penalty structure, I think focus really right now is preventing the penalty structure from being augmented in any way, because as Monica said, that's currently the language that's in the budget trailer bill. So that's really the priority.
Okay. Unless that's down, of course.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, Director Beltran, there's some very vague language in that with respect to new load. And so we believe that it's probably more directed towards load serving entities or CCAs that are trying to expand their service territory.
Okay.
But if taken just on its, on its surface, it could mean new connections in our service territory. It could be expanded to include, be much more than what it was intended to be.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Other questions? No, I'll open it up for public comment. Andrea?
Yes, looks like we have Bruce Carney who would like to make a comment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrea. Bruce, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for the clear but depressing presentation. I think it goes a little bit deeper than the presentation to the full board a few weeks back. It seems that in trying to balance reliability and affordability, the CPUC is really tilting very heavily toward reliability without considering demand response, which could be less expensive and more flexible. and doesn't require new steel to be put in the ground and new wires to be put overhead. But what I'd like to ask you to comment on, if you can, Monica, is what impact you imagine the newer and less well-managed CCAs might be experiencing from these challenges. There are some other aspects of the age of a CCA that really impact its ability to procure green energy, its ability to beat PG&E on price. The bankruptcies we've seen in some of the Southern California CCAs largely have to do with starting at the wrong time in history. And I'm sure that SVCE will find a way to weather whatever storm comes along. But if several other smaller CCAs were to fail as a result of this, it could sort of tarnish the entire CCA movement and get the legislature pointed in the wrong direction, especially given some of the advantages that you've pointed out that the 3 IOUs have been given. So how big a risk do you think the younger, smaller CCAs are facing?
Chair Walea, would you like me to respond?
I was just going to ask you, do you want to respond now? Or if you don't have anyone else, this is a good time before I close the public comment period. That way Bruce can comment if you need to. Please go ahead, Monica.
I think, Bruce, you raise a really interesting point, and certainly one that we've heard mentioned before, that this creates a bit of a I guess a steep barrier to entry that didn't exist before for a new CCA trying to form. And it's not just resource adequacy, right? It's all the new clean procurement requirements. So the ones that are the midterm reliability, and also the ones just to meet their RPS, their renewable portfolio standard. There are some, and Charles, you feel free to chime in here if I get this wrong. There are some kind of exceptions or allowances that new CCAs are given when they form. They're actually given a certain amount of resource adequacy from their incumbent utility. Is that right, Charles? So you can, if you just start off with some resource adequacy, right?
I think they're given a window of time which they're not assessed penalties. They're still given notice that they are deficient, so they should potentially go out and try to buy. But it's a small period of time where they're not held to the RA standards that everyone else is.
Right, but ultimately they will be, and they'll be in the same position that we are, right? So they're not going to be they don't have any advantage to us, and they may have a disadvantage because, again, some of us have started procurement a while ago, either through our power purchase agreements or through a laddering strategy that we've had in place for years. So to start new would be very kind of problematic right now. And we hope that we can't manage what other CCAs are doing. Cal CCA is trying really hard to put in place best management practices to ensure that all the CCAs that exist and that will exist in the future adhere to certain kind of procurement and financial and risk management practices, so that collectively as a group we look good. But I don't know, Bruce, like what the long-term consequences. It would be speculation on my part.
Thank you, Monica. Andre, any other public speakers?
No, Chair, I see no additional hands raised.
Oh, wonderful. I will close the public comment period and bring it back to the committee. As Bruce said, it is a lot of information that has been put together, beautifully presented by the team. Thank you all for that. Committee, any comments at this point? I know this is only an informational item. It's fundamental to how the SVCE team functions to put all the pieces together. And as Monica said, it keeps on getting more and more complex. Okay, let's move on to item number 4, program snapshot for California Electric Vehicle Incentive Program. Also a presentation information item only. And I believe we have Nupur here. Welcome, Nupur.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Napor Harmath. I'm the manager of decarbonization programs at SVCE, and I work on Justin's team. I'm going to give you the introduction that Justin normally gives because he was unable to attend for this part of the meeting. But essentially what we're trying to do through these program snapshots at the executive committee is really give you a quick insight into our decarbonization programs and primarily to give you an idea of what your communities are seeing from SVCE. We'll focus a little bit on the key decisions that we're making as a part of our program design process. And we probably don't have an opportunity to go too deep today. So happy to field some questions after I present on this particular program. But if you do have questions, please feel free to follow up afterward. And with that, I'll jump into today's program snapshot, which is on our California Electric Vehicle Incentive Program, fondly known as Cali VIP. So some of you may remember, or if you were around several years ago, this program was one of SVCE's earlier programs for electric vehicle infrastructure incentives. Next slide, please. The program objective is really to incentivize electric vehicle infrastructure, both level 2 and DC fast chargers. This slide really shows you the realm of all of our electric vehicle infrastructure programs, both ones that we have partnered on with other entities like Ecology Action and EV Match to add level 2 charging at multifamily units, as well as our technical assistance program known as Future Fit Assist, and our more recently launched program from fall of 2022, which is the Charging Installation Incentive Program that provides rebates for both level 1 and level 2 charging at multifamily units. Next slide, please. So today we're really going to focus on the Cali VIP. Next slide, please. And this is actually a statewide program to install both fast chargers as well as level 2 charging. Our goal is to accomplish 1,100 level 2 connectors and 85 DC fast chargers in SVC territory. The chargers have to be publicly accessible, so it's really open to a wide variety of entities who can apply for this funding, as long as they make those chargers available to the general public, so they can't be behind a gate or a code that limits their use. It was launched in 2020 and then was there was a lot of uptake early on because it's a first come first serve program. And then since then, there has been an ongoing reservation process. Across the state, the program is funded by the California Energy Commission, CEC. There's $55 million that are dedicated to what they're calling the Peninsula Silicon Valley Project. And that's a partnership that SVCE has with several of the CCAs and municipal utilities in our area. For our territory specifically, we have $6 million in funding from the CEC for our fast chargers and another $6 million match from SVCE funds for level 2 chargers. Next slide, please. So the incentives that we're offering are about up to $6,000 for level 2 and about $80,000 for every DC fast charger, typically covering about 75% of the project costs. There are additional adders for disadvantaged and low income areas, as well as multifamily units. And the bar graph on the right that you see here is actually included in the board packet at the end of every CEO report. But it gives you a view into how our funding has been reserved to date. So you can see that most of our DC fast charger funds have actually been fully reserved. And to date, we have 10 operational DC fast chargers in our territory through this particular program. For our level 2 chargers, we do have several funds that are reserved, as well as several that are still being processed. And then you can see that the top bucket there, which is a $1.5 million, that's funds that we are yet to release in our territory. So to date, we have more than 160 level 2 connectors that have been installed. Next slide, please. Some of the key design elements that this program has are that we have this adder or additional $1,000 incentive for multifamily sites. And we've seen that about 40% of the chargers that have been installed to date, mostly level 2, have gone in at multifamily units. So we've kind of seen that be fairly successful. Now, since we have our own program, which is called the CHIP program, we are allowing sites to layer, which is claim incentives from both our SVCE CHIP program as well as from this broader Cali VIP program. So multifamily sites can really take advantage of that at this time. Our partnership across the county, across multiple counties, and really working with other CCAs and utilities has helped to have a consistent set of eligibility criteria and instructions for applicants in this program. And so that has really facilitated some entities coming back and applying for sites across a larger area. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it is a first come, first served program. So we saw a lot of applications come in the first week. And then over time, some of those applications dropped off because their site wasn't eligible or for other reasons. But we've also continued to accept additional applications into the program since then. Next slide, please. And so just next steps, we're continuing to process our application. We know that our DC fast charger funds are oversubscribed at this time, and we actually have a wait list of applications for DC fast charging. So we are planning to shift some of the funding that we had originally envisioned for level 2 charging to expand that funding pool to include DC fast charging, so we can process more DC fast charger applications and have more of those installed in our territory. You can find additional details in this program at the link that's on the page. And thank you for your time. I'm happy to take some questions right now if anyone has any.
Thank you, Nupur. Always good to see something positive moving forward, opportunities. Brian, did Rob raise his hand first? I'm sorry.
Rob's first. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, Rob, go ahead.
As I have an electric car and I start to drive it to Las Vegas and back and things like that, one of the things that I'm noting is and I think there's chargers out there they're trying to make money on, but they're not always maintained that well. And as they start to get older, the maintenance is going to be more and more of an issue. Sometimes you come upon chargers that need to be reset and there's nobody regularly resetting them or something. I came upon one where the whole handle was smashed, although the charger thought it was available, for example. And so I'm wondering, if we're giving grants, maybe we should be thinking about something in the contract requiring something related to maintenance. And, as we get down the road in 3 years, we might be wanting to think about programs to encourage maintenance or something like that. So, when it's all new, we want to stuff as many in as we can. But I can, when you're driving long distance, you need the reliability that something's going to be there and working. I purposely choose a place where I know there's 2 or 3 chargers in case one is broken, even though it says it's available, or of course somebody could be charging in it too. But there's as many times something won't work for my car for whatever reason, as there is somebody charging in it. So I just thought I would put that idea in your head to think about in the program.
Yeah, great comment. I actually do require an operations and maintenance plan for some of our own incentive programs. And then another thing I wanted to mention was that there is an uptime reporting requirement for EV chargers that are going in. I think that goes into effect as of this year. And so the chargers have to be online a certain percentage of the time, and that is going to hold EVSE providers responsible for maintaining those chargers and ensuring they're actually working and serving people who need to use them. Director Makachek, do you have a question?
Yes, I was at Los Altos Community Center, and I believe they've got a fast charger there. Did they get an SVCE grant for putting that in?
I'm not aware of that off the top of my head. I think I would have to
Oh, okay.
look into that, but I don't believe it would have been through the Cali VIP program.
Okay.
But I can check.
And then just if you could just describe a little bit more. So you've got a DC fast charger there in a location. It's got to be obviously publicly accessible. And then that DC fast charger, they have to charge for the electricity, but it's the capital cost that the incentive relates to. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And
So the
does it
electricity cost is paid by the site host or by the EVSE vendor, whoever owns the charger.
right, say a charge point or whatever, and then so these are, you've got a wait list for all these DC fast chargers, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Maybe I'll follow up with you after.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So essentially, I'll jump in. Yaman, give me 1 second, continuing on Brian's thought. So the price point difference is such between the DC fast charger versus the level 2 that we have in the past given grants for more of the level 2s because it's also easier for people to move forward with that. That was one of the issues we were having in our city at some point. We were looking at capital improvement projects and the price point became an issue for us. So when you said there is a wait list, any idea how long? For the DC fast chargers?
I believe we have, I don't want to misspeak, but I think it's like several 10. So I want to say it's like 30 or so
Okay.
applications
That's-
on the wait list. Yeah,
I
and
just
we
wanted
probably
to-
won't have funding for all of them because with the DC fast charger being very capital intensive, as you said, we're probably only going to be able to fund a handful of those.
Thank you. That's what I just wanted to ballpark.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yvonne, for waiting. Your questions, please.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know, you said that that we were looking to put more direct chargers. So I'm just wondering what that means in terms of numbers. The more direct chargers and probably more expensive, then what does that mean as far as numbers that we'd be able to accomplish?
When you say numbers, do you mean number of vehicles charged or number of fast
Number of
chargers that we anticipate installing?
Right. If we're doing fast chargers, how many more do you think we're going to be able to do? And then that takes away from a bucket of slower chargers. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what is the net, change, and where would we be losing those chargers? Is that in multifamily homes? Is that where would that be? Or is that just businesses, entities that are looking to sponsor them?
Yeah, so you're right that the DC fast chargers are not going to be at the multifamily homes. They're going to be at typically retail or other commercial areas. And so there will be an offset there. I think our goal currently was to get 85 DC fast chargers installed. We're still working towards that goal. We still only have 10 installed. So I think it's hard to tell exactly how many additional we're going to get because it really depends on if we continue to get applications for level 2 chargers. So it's hard to answer kind of where we're going until we see more of those funds expended. But I will say that there are plenty of other programs that are still available for level 2 charging, including the Bay Area Air Quality District and PG&E. And so several of these programs do have L2 charging, as well as SVCE's own program that is dedicated to incentives for level 2.
Okay, I want to make sure that we're, I'm sure other organizations are doing it too, but I want to make sure that SVCE, that we are committed to making sure that we're getting those level 2 chargers into the multifamily homes, because I do feel that's where it's going to make a big difference. We've got to change people's habits, and we've got to make it easily accessible to them in order to do that, introducing the idea and providing the support, if you will, wraparound services for it. So that would be my only comment on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, let's open it up for public comment. Andrea?
Yes, Chair, we have one hand raised currently, and that is Bruce Carney.
Thank you. Bruce?
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to weigh in on this topic. 5 years ago, I chaired a task force in Mountain View that looked at a wide variety of sustainability efforts. And one of the things that we identified with respect to EV chargers is signage. So not just being publicly accessible, but being publicly visible. And you can imagine one reason that might be important is for a non-EV driver who's thinking about making an EV purchase. If they see a lot of signs that make it clear to them that there are conveniently located EV chargers in the areas where they shop or commute, that helps move them in that direction. Promises were made in Mountain View to add exterior signage to parking garages where the chargers were in the garage, but none of that has happened yet. For EV drivers like Rob and myself, there are apps that you can use that will help you find the EV charger. But for somebody who hasn't yet made the switch, there's a real information gap. And so I hope that going forward, your program can require prominent signage to lead people, those who have EVs and those who will have them in the future, to the charger. A related concern has to do with utilization. Which locations are really getting a lot of business? Is SVCE requiring some sort of monthly metrics or even day of the week, hour of the day metrics to understand which of the investments that they've made are producing kilowatt hours for drivers and which are going unused? This should help in the design of future enhancements to the program or future iterations. I think the point about maintenance is a very important one, and it sort of goes along with utilization of the chargers. For example, if you see no charging sessions have been initiated in the last week, whereas previously they had been, that should be an alert for the service team to get out there and find out whether it's the data that's not flowing or the electricity into the car's battery that's not flowing. And so those are all the thoughts I have related to this. And I do think it's an excellent program and want to continue to see it flourishing, but being improved along the way.
Thank you so much, Bruce. All great ideas, as you typically have a lot of good insights. Thank you. Do we have other public speakers on?
No additional hands raised.
Okay, thank you. I close the public comment period and bring it back to the committee. Any comments? I guess we are happy we're moving forward. This is one of the easier ones to deal with, especially when we think of the subject we were talking of, resource adequacy, just before this. Okay, with that, we are almost at the end of the meeting today. Any remarks, overall remarks from any members of the committee? That means things are good. Wonderful. Happy to hear that. And remarks from staff.
I do have a comment, Chair. This is more of a reminder that our next meeting in March will be after the governor is anticipated to end the emergency order. So we will be in person at SVCE's office, unless I am notified otherwise of another publicly accessible location in which you will be participating, which I will need to notice on our agenda. So I'll be sending a reminder, but just wanted to let everybody know.
Thank you, Andrea. Always staying on top of things. Brian.
Yes, I'm pleased to hear that. But I was also wondering how it would work if we posted 72 hours in advance to attend the meeting remotely at, say, Monte Sereno City Council chambers. We've got the technology there with a owl camera, and we could have people from Saratoga or anywhere, or Los Gatos attend there. Then it'd save the driving going to the SVCE offices. So and I think that we may have a conflict if someone uses the AB whatever, SB whatever the number is, because they can't attend because of COVID, and we need 50% of the, or we need a quorum at SVCE's headquarters.
Correct.
Could you just talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so SVCE, we consider this as kind of the home base of all of our meetings. So yes, if you would like to attend from Monte Sereno City Hall, that would be fine. I would just notice that for AB 2449, that's really used for emergency situations. So I don't know that we would know that far in advance if somebody would be wanting to use that if they are not feeling well. But I would need to be notified as soon as somebody wanted to use that. Therefore, I would have to confirm a quorum, that we would have a quorum within our service territory, which would still count. But we would need, yes, if somebody wanted to utilize AB 2449, we would need to have a quorum at SVCE offices.
So Andrea, I'm going to jump in with what Brian, I think, is asking. If somebody uses AB 2449 later that day or just the day prior, less than 72 hours, and Brian is planning to attend from his city hall, which has been notified in the 72-hour notification. At that time, do you still need quorum only specifically at SVCE office, or is the quorum to be counted SVCE office plus Monte Sereno City Hall that was already talked of?
I would need to check, or I'll look to my colleague Kevin, who's been working on this with me. We just need a quorum within the member jurisdiction, which Monte Sereno accounts for.
Yes.
So I think it would be fine, but if you were to participate from somewhere outside of the area, then no, that would not be able to be used.
Okay, that was my understanding, but it'll be good to have that clarification. Brian, is that what you were thinking of?
Yes, that's the other thing is that if we were going to do the noticing 72-hour notice, and then we needed to have a quorum in the physical SVC offices, then we just say, okay, I'll go to the office. I was just kind of a conservation effort not to go there in person, but I could do that at the last minute if a quorum was required. Would that be okay? Maybe you can follow up with that question as well.
Yeah, I can do that. I think this is all pretty fluid as we start transitioning back into in-person. So a lot of these things that we're coming across are going to be kind of learn as we go.
So
Okay.
Brian, a follow-up. I have a feeling in that case, if your location has been notified and you are not going to be there, we may still need to keep it open for the public to sit there.
Yes.
I'm fairly confident about that.
Okay,
That's
that's no problem.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
good, because then I could plan for that and hard code it, if you will, that someone's going to be there for public comment. And then at the last minute, if I have to go to SVCE's offices, that's no problem at all.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
and I would almost always be at Brian's location too, because it's walking distance from my house.
Okay. Wonderful. I'm glad we're having this conversation right now, especially with the small size of the committee and the quorum being just 3.
Yeah.
Great. Yuan has some questions or comments.
I just wanted to share. I've asked Andrea as well to call in from Morgan Hill City Hall. So I just wanted to share that again because we're such a small little group.
So that pretty much almost says we need the answer. Whether it's the locations within the jurisdiction, SVCE jurisdiction, that add up to the quorum.
Correct. So
And
we can
those-
do that so long as nobody's using AB 2449. If
Correct.
somebody wants to use AB 2449, we would all need to have, not all, but a quorum would need to be in one physical location.
Okay,
Okay.
wonderful. Does that help you, Yvonne?
Yeah, I just wanted to share with the group, you know, what I was doing as well, because I've talked with Andrea and I thought I should just, since there's only a handful of us. And then, yeah, I mean, like Brian was saying, you know, if something comes up for somebody, then we just work it out.
Yes, wonderful. Great.
Awesome.
Any other staff remarks? No? Well, I don't think we need a motion or roll call to adjourn, Andre. No? Okay, I would like to wish you all a nice, dry, warm afternoon. Stay warm, and the meeting is adjourned. Take care.